And we are live. So if you're a senior technical leader and everything still comes back to you, decisions, escalations, delivery, your calendar's not the issue. You've become the system your team runs on. In this episode, we'll name the mechanism that creates dependency and the first moves that break it without lowering standards. But before we jump in, I wanted to let you know that this is the first episode of a new season of Gaining the Technology Leadership Edge. This season is focused on one problem I see over and over with senior leaders. Smart teams, high standards, but everything comes back through them. Every conversation this season is going to be designed to answer one question. How do you reduce dependency without lowering the bar? And that's why this conversation matters. So today, I'm happy to introduce Marnie Stockman and Nick Coniglio, operators who built and sold a software business and now teach leadership in a way that's practical enough to use under pressure. This matters if you're a CTO or VP of engineering trying to build a team that can make decisions and execute without needing you in the middle. So before we talk about frameworks, guys, I want to start with the earlier version of your leadership when instincts made you a little less effective. So welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
So you guys have two different defaults the way you lead. You have one of you leads with optimism and connection, the other leads with questions and constraint. So early on, what did each of you overuse? Encouragement or problem solving?
Oh, well, yeah, I would probably be the one that errs on the side of optimism and it'll be okay for sure. That would be I've over-indexed on that. Nick, how about you?
Yeah, without a doubt, I'm the opposite. I've turned everything into a problem, and I think one of the reasons why we work so well together is because we have different strengths, and I would say that, to me, I took the too often, especially early in my career, I took the human element out of it, and I was all about the tactical, the strategic, the problem solving, and I wasn't enough of the encourager like Marnie is, or the optimistic person like Marnie is. So yeah, I think you nailed it right out of the gate, who we are, and the fact that it's a good thing, but also that, sometimes you overuse it and you overextend yourself and you miss out on being a well-rounded leader specifically.
Nick, you're reminding me of one time I had somebody say to me, you take too long to get everybody to consensus.
Yeah.
Like I wanted everybody to be on the same page, and they told me that they thought I was taking too long to do that.
So what did that train the team to do when something got unclear or uncomfortable?
Well, I mean, I would say that and from my perspective, there was a lot of admiring the problem without getting to a solution. And it's interesting, as you were talking about your intro and the problem that you're solving with this podcast, the statement, the bottleneck always comes at the top of the bottle, comes to mind. And, if I was waiting for consensus and we were just busy going around in circles admiring the problem, it just slowed everything down. So I would say that was the biggest sticking point for me, to have to learn how to get past that and to get a decision made.
Yeah, and I'll kind of add, because you brought up a key phrase there, like being uncomfortable, and I think this goes back to who I was as a leader, right? I was all about the problem, the problem solving mindset, and not enough about the people skills. And one of the key people skills that I think any leader needs to really focus on is the ability to show vulnerability and show when you are uncomfortable, because the reality of it is, if in any team environment that you're working on, there's going to have to be uncomfortable problems that you solve, uncomfortable conversations that you have, uncomfortable clients that you work with, and it's really something that requires some practice. And I think the big eye opener for me, especially again early on, was the fact that I wasn't showing anybody else. I wasn't showing that vulnerability to actually be uncomfortable with things. I sure I was, but I wasn't showing it, and that really didn't bode well for getting the team to be able to react that way and to be able to embrace being uncomfortable.
So that's really interesting, because I know a lot of leaders I speak with, they get confused between supportive and available. So when did your availability become the escalation path?
Well, I you're talking to somebody who I was the bottleneck in a number of companies that I worked with, right? So, the standpoint, if I wasn't available for whatever reason, and this aligns perfectly to, I think, your theme of the season that you're talking about. There were problems because I held so much knowledge. My background a little bit is I was employee single digit in 4 companies that really experienced a lot of growth. And in each one of those companies, I had so much institutional knowledge, and I became so much of a bottleneck. And, I learned throughout the course of each one of those companies how dangerous that is, and the fact that there's a critical point of failure. So, that's really where my origin story really began, is the fact that I realized, okay, for us to truly be successful as an organization, you need to rely on your team, and you need to get the most out of them. So I'm all about not being the bottleneck, not being that one point of failure, because I am not available. Marnie, fill in the gaps there where
Well,
I missed.
it's interesting because the other day, I can't even remember who we were talking to, and they got really excited when we talked about that training your team and helping each person become the best version of themselves, right? We were talking about the combo platter of our books, really makes the whole company scalable. So I think that's the part that misses when you, are the keeper of all the knowledge, right? It's not always the company's as strong as the weakest link. If you're the main link, like you keep that running, but a company's way more scalable when that knowledge is spread throughout, is what came to mind. Probably not exactly what you meant, but that's just the piece that stuck with me.
So what was the first repeatable pattern? What kept showing up that you kept absorbing?
Oh, there's been many, Mike, for sure. I think the biggest thing was the whole notion of, so I'm the technology side of the house, right? Whenever there's any particular issue at all, right, it always ended up where I had to be part of the conversation, which was in conflict because I was also trying to grow the business and be out there at the same time. So the pattern that I saw was they relied too much on me, right? So what could we do to fix that? And we tried so many different avenues. We created playbooks. We created internal lunch, learning programs, lunch and learns. But the reality of it was, you can give people all sorts of tools in their tool chest from a technology and a technical perspective. And I don't mean just technology itself. I mean just skills. But what we quickly found out, and Marnie helped me realize this a lot, was that you just don't need the skills, the technical acumen to execute something. You really need to focus on the softer side, the soft skills, to teach people how to communicate, how to be vulnerable, to show trust, to create a trustworthy environment. And that's really where we started to see so much growth in all the different initiatives that we took on, is when we started investing more on the people skills than the technical hard skills that typically focus on.
And don't you think, Nick, also that when we really shared the why and the customer story with the engineering team. I mean, I can remember very specifically some meetings because I was customer facing. So I'm a different kind of bottleneck. But that you and I would present the why and the customer story. And when they could hear the customer voice, I think that the engineers really liked seeing the value that people were getting from what they were doing. So they knew they were building good things, but to see people excited about it was important for them. And then to see how passionately we cared about what they were bringing to the world was critically important. So I think in the world of the soft skill development, also the big why was critically important.
So what did it start costing? Speed, standards, or your ability to think?
I would say all of the above. I honestly,
I think it plays out different ways, don't you?
Yeah. I think without a doubt.
The amount of sleep that Nick or I got as well, depending on who was the bottleneck at the time, right?
Yeah. I mean, but you touch on all of them, right? I mean, our own ability to think and get things done, it just wasn't possible because we were busy answering being the bottleneck, and then of course you don't have time to ensure that you're building to the standard that you want to build to, but also implementing different standards for your development practices. So everything is impacted by that. But I do want to touch on what Manu just said, because I think it's so important, because the first 15 to 20 years of my career, 15, I would say, I worked in several different product development organizations, IT organizations, and I can probably count on one hand how many times that me or my team really were given the why behind what we were doing. I think it's such an oversight for so many technology organizations today, and it's a miss, because it motivates employees, it gives them a sense of purpose, and it honestly helps develop trust, which I think we all know is a huge part of any good performing team.
And I think from the customer facing side of the house, a lot of my team, I ran customer success. We knew enough to be dangerous for Nick's team. So we were, technically savvy enough to reset passwords for people, like low level types of things, right? But because of this, Nick wasn't able to investigate, like no patterns came out, because there were 7 people on my end doing some tier 1 types of things that could have been resolved programmatically, but we were all manually fixing it ourselves. Like, oh, I'm not going to put in a ticket for a password reset. I know how to do that. I'll help the customer, because we were very much focused on getting, immediate customer success for our clients. But by doing that, patterns in the product didn't play out. Like all of a sudden support wasn't seeing that there were 19 password resets. So maybe we could fix the product so there weren't 19 password resets that needed to happen. Right. So we were masking some problems in that way. And for our team, it became, we were spending our day solving the problems that we shouldn't have been solving, and then had to spend our evenings like doing our actual work. So I think that's a different kind of problem from the non-technical side of the house, of how we, the humans, were causing problems. And so we weren't the bottleneck, we were causing problems for other folks, which I think is important to point out as well.
So Marnie, you've led in education and then in a software company.
Yeah.
And those environments reward different leadership behavior. What worked in schools that broke in a fast-moving company?
I actually think done right, leadership can work the same way. It's sort of funny. I often at conferences, so I was the CEO of the company that Nick and I co-founded. And so I often had to present on the IT problem that we were discussing. And I had started out as a high school math teacher, so I knew there was some distrust in the room on why they should listen to me. And my typical response was, I sold pre-calculus to 16-year-olds. So I can help you sell anything with this product. And they would laugh and move on. And I say that to mean that all of the leadership is all about helping the person, the company, the client in front of you become their best version and solve their problems. So being a high school math teacher, it was all about helping 16-year-olds figure out why the devil they wanted to learn pre-calculus when I knew for a fact they did not want to. And in a company, it was all about helping our clients figure out how they could have a better business by using our products, helping our employees figure out why our product was important. So, and their role in delivering that to clients. So they're shockingly similar when it comes right down to it. In Lead It Like Lasso, Nick and I always talked about how you do anything is how you do everything. And that leadership really happens in a classroom, a locker room, a boardroom, a living room. And if you really pay attention to who you are and how you lead, you can use those skills in any environment.
So were there any things that you had to stop doing even though you were good at it?
Oh, I mean, I think Nick obviously, had to stop solving all of the problems. I was technically good enough to solve. Nick and I joked that I was at least a 0.5 tier 1 tech. Like I had enough of those technical skills. I absolutely had to stop solving the technical problems that I shouldn't have been solving and put them in the process. The other thing is, this feels like I'm in a confessional now, is that I had to I had to use the process because everybody in the company knew it wasn't really broke unless Nick couldn't fix it. And so I could get any of my problems solved if I just went to Nick, whereas I should have put it through the process so it could have been done correctly.
So Nick, you've led in support, engineering, and executive roles. Yeah. Those roles usually create what I call hero habits, okay? So which hero habit was hardest to let go of? Jumping into tickets, deciding fast, fixing people in conflict, or maybe rewriting plans?
I will say that I developed quite the personal hero complex from a technical support aspect, right? I mean, that's what I love to do. I love fixing things, and I was in a position because I had in all the places that I ran engineering teams, I also ended up running support at some point. That was kind of the transition. I would start running the engineering team and I would kind of roll over to the support side. But because that allowed me to get my hands dirty, because that's just something I love to do, right? Okay, we've got a long running query or something to that effect. I'm going to get on it. I'm going to jump on it. So that was hard for me to get rid of, getting my hands dirty, because personally, I just love to do it. But what I learned, of course, is that I was creating a bottleneck, right? So how do I fix it? It's all the things that we talked about earlier. But what really got me off that is I scratched that itch somewhere else, right? I love getting my hands dirty with code. So I wrote a little app that tracked my golfing stats, right? I built personal hobbies to scratch the itch, so to speak. And that allowed me, in a weird kind of way, to be much more free and open to get other people up to speed and do the things that I love to do. But I'll wrap it with this. It's really hard when you're known as that person that comes in and can solve any problem, to let go of that, because it feels really good. But the reality of it is, I was a young Nick at that time, and I was more interested in my own feelings than the growth of the company. And when you eventually start building companies and you're a founder of the company, you realize that that's not the right approach.
So before we move on, you guys have a new book out. So tell us a little bit about the book and why you wrote it.
Go ahead, Nick.
Well, the book is called The Business of You. You've got it up on the screen, so thank you. And it's subtitled "Ask the Right Questions, Tell Your Story, and Lead Your Life." And it's a story about, it's a fable, first of all, and it's a story about a college student who is seemingly doing all the right things. She gets good grades. She is tracking for internships. She has connections. She's reaching out, but she's getting zero traction. And the reality of it is, we're seeing this every day. We know it's kind of a tough job market out there, and there's so many. If you just go out on LinkedIn, you'll see people who have great resumes, but they have an inability to break through because there's thousands of other people through bots and through other mechanisms, automation, that are applying for the same position. So we wanted to write a story that very much paralleled work we do with a lot of young people, whether they're in high school or in college, or they're going through some job transition, in terms of, okay, what are the things that you need to do to stand out and differentiate yourself? And at the heart of that, and there's a lot to it, but at the heart of that, there's a lot of self-reflection, right? It's, okay, truly understanding what drives me, and being curious about that, not just saying, oh, you know what, I'm a problem solver. Well, tell me why you're a problem solver. How does that make you feel? So there's a lot more to it. We modeled it in the spirit of a corporate culture. So Sydney, the lead character, gets to visit different departments, like the Department of Human Resources, where that's all about finding out who she is, what her core values are. And then we kind of go through chief marketing officer. How do I pitch myself? There's so much. Marty, what did I miss from the book that is important to know?
Well, I think along the way, Sydney is given a magical mentor. So it's written as a business fable. So it's a very easy, quick story to read. It's not written from like a textbook. And the mentor provides her with an app where she gets to kind of gamify learning about herself and the self-reflection that Nick mentioned. And at the back of the book, we let the cat out of the bag that's actually the app that we're building to kind of put a career coach in every kid's pocket.
That's awesome. That is awesome. I recommend everyone get the book. I read through it twice already, and just to prepare for this interview. And just like their first book, Lead It Like Lasso, it's just really well done. And as I say, I love the little images that you use in there. You feel like you're a part of the journey. So kudos to you guys. Great book. Really great book.
Thank you. That is one of the reasons we wrote it as a fable, is because we really feel like everybody can see Sydney, the main character, like part of themselves in there. So we wanted them to see her thought process. So at the end of each section, we have her journal, what she was thinking about in terms of the lessons that she learned, thinking that the reader could also do that self-reflection. Because one thing that we've learned with all of the students that we've talked to, with all the employees that we've hired along the way, is that the self-reflection's awkward, but it's okay. So if you can see the character doing that work, then maybe you can feel comfortable yourself doing that work.
Cool. Well, let's get to the inflection point. When did you realize that the same leadership moves that built momentum were also creating dependency?
Ooh, that's a good one. What do you think?
That is a great one. I don't know if there was an aha moment. I think you kind of always know. But the first one's obvious, right? Okay, we're doing these things, we're building momentum, right? This is going where we're going. But what does momentum lead to? It leads to growth, right? And then as soon as you start, as soon as you start experiencing that growth, you realize that, oh, this is great. We've built this momentum. Okay, but I've also created dependency and roadblocks and single points of failure. And I think sometimes that's okay, right? When we were starting, it was just the two of us, and we're back in that mode right now, building that app, Blue, from our book, The Business of You, right? We realized that, okay, it's all of us. I mean, it's the two of us. And, if we bring somebody on, they're going to depend on us. But you know what? We've got to start getting and generating momentum. I think the the realization in my experiences through the 4 companies that I started, or I was very early to come on board, or I started, was gradually I learned each time to have that point be quicker and recognize it faster. That, okay, yes, there's momentum. You got to build it. And that's going to require my own intellectual knowledge and vision. But the sooner you can start offloading that and bringing on people to share in that. And I think that's another key point is, these experiences treat you the types of people that I think you should be focused on bringing on. And I don't, there's always a reason to bring on people that could just do and build widget X. But to me, that is not a really good goal for a good organization. I think it's bringing on people that can build process, can build repeatability, can build institutional knowledge through the work they do, and not be that bottleneck that we've been talking about so much.
The challenge is that you get hired because you're really good at what you do. And so then you do it so well that you get promoted, right? Nick and I talk all the time about being an accidental leader. Next thing you know, you're in charge of other people, but you were the best at what you were doing, which is why you got promoted. And it doesn't immediately occur to anybody that I should stop doing what I was the best at doing, right? That doesn't make sense. I guess I had the lucky good fortune of having a mentor who said to me, Marnie, you're one of those who, like, if you want it done right, you want to do it yourself, but that's not going to scale. Learn to delegate. Get people to trust in your process so that they can do the process.
Yeah, it's funny. I'll add one more thing to that. The software company that Marty and I built and exited from, it was a customer success solution, SaaS platform, right? Targeted at IT business owners, managed service providers that, are these small companies that are just everywhere. And they're typically anywhere from 2 to 100 people. And all the owners of these companies, they were former technology, they were former network engineers, or, things like that. And they struggled significantly with scaling their business. And our solution was a way for them to communicate their business, not only to their customers, right, through business reviews, quarterly business reviews, but also to their own internal employees, to help them, nudge them, and figure out that, okay, that mindset of being the best at something, has a purpose, but the purpose is definitely not growth and execution of a team that executes well. That being the best and the owner of all that information, it stalls, and it stalls quickly. And it really crystallized because we worked with so many of those people that really had no experience running a business. They were just really good at wiring, server racks and configuring firewalls and things like that.
Yeah, that I had the same experience when I was a CTO. I thought that I had to do the things that I was, that I'd always been good at, and I had to take care of that. And that led to me working 105-hour work weeks, which obviously isn't sustainable, both, for life and health. But that's why, if I encourage the viewers to take the quiz that's on the screen now, the firefighter CTO quiz, because it's going to tell you what type of leader you are and whether or not there's any changes that you need to make to that. So what specifically was breaking? Decisions, delivery, customers, hiring, or was it team conflict?
I suspect it's an all. I'm trying to think of specific examples along the way. Well, I think decisions don't get made as quickly if everything's running through one person, for sure, because you don't have the time. So that's the first thing that comes to mind from my perspective. I mean, the other thing that happens from the customer's perspective is the clients aren't getting the service that they need. So customer success starts to break down.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. Yeah, I mean, Mike, you mentioned something that I learned as well. You mentioned it in your CTO role, and a really important thing for me to understand at some point was that I don't know. I don't have to know how to do everything that my team is doing. And you feel like so many leaders feel like they need to know that because so many leaders, like Marnie said, are accidental leaders. They got promoted because they're functional expertise and they're really good at something, and then they started getting team members, and they're like, okay, I need to know, what coding patterns that we should use, or what vulnerabilities we have, depending on whatever. They need to know everything. When the reality is, you don't. So I think the thing that breaks the thing that you notice that isn't working well is kind of the teamwork aspect, the trust, and people feeling like they're contributing. There's a lack of it when you are the owner of anything and everything, and that becomes obvious. Then suddenly you have people that are leaving, which then leads to all the other problems. It's you bring other people in, and they're then you got to retrain them on what little segment of things that you want them to do, and then they get frustrated because they want to do more. So I think the bottom line is this: you can't do everything. You don't need to know the nooks and crannies and everything specific on what your team is doing. You just need to understand how to ask the right questions and identify opportunities, identify risks and concerns, vulnerabilities, and that's more the mindset as opposed to I need to understand how to write this specific component using React or whatever technology that you're using.
Yeah, I think a lot of leaders, they think that they need time management when the real issue is that they have unmanaged decision load. So what were the top two sources of decision load that kept pulling you back in?
I mean, I want to say I probably didn't trust that somebody on the team had the right answer, or it would take too long for them to get to that answer. But then my world is very different than your world, when it came to like support, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a good point, though. I think, and I think just for putting our business owners hat on, how to communicate, how to have conversations with customers in a way that you would trust yourself to do, but not somebody else to do, because there are, one of our core values was raving fans, and we would do anything and everything to create raving fans. And the decision to allow, somebody who might not have all the answers speak with your prospects or your customers was a tough decision to make.
Yeah.
But we had to make that decision to extend ourselves, to allow us to make other decisions. From a technology perspective, the biggest impact was, trying to really understand and maintain some level of velocity with our development team. And every decision that I was making was based off of that velocity or that productivity of the team. And again, I go back to what I've said on the broken record, but having a productive team was such an important, or a trust, a team that trusted each other was such an important factor in the velocity that we were able to bring to the table for our organizations. That ends up being the biggest thing that we had to work on.
I would say the one thing that comes to mind, especially since the holidays just passed, is sometimes the phrase like, I don't have time to cook with the kids. When the kids were little, and there were days where I would have the patience and the time to like, yes, we are going to bake the cookies together. and by doing that enough times, I can remember the day that my son called. He was 10, and I was driving back from something, and he said, do you want me to cook dinner tonight, Mom? I could make spaghetti. Yeah, you could, right? Because I'd cooked with the kids enough. But if I had constantly not had time to cook with the kids, probably would have been some fast food on the way home.
That is a great story. That's a great story. So what rule did you possibly install to stop being the default decider?
Well, I can tell you one thing that Nick will come up with the right answer, but I will tell you one thing that definitely does come to mind is that I've said too many times in my life, did you want me to do the work or document that I did the work? And I know that I need to document that I did the work so that we would have it written down and have a process. So that's just the first phrase that comes to mind. Nick, what are you thinking?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that I can think back to my experience. At some point, I started running all of my meetings and not running the meetings. Right? I was basically a fly on the wall, and the team knew that when I was really trying to remove myself from being that bottleneck and that point of failure. And of course, I would participate when needed, and I would moderate when needed, right? But that was my one rule at the time with one of the companies I was working with, which was, okay, we are going to have other people step up and run these meetings. It's not going to be me. And that was a big opening into having people start to see that growth of themselves is something that was in their future at that particular company. And little did they know, it helped me much more than it helped them.
That reminds me of, I had a one-on-one with one of my team members who had brought a problem to me. And I recognized that he was always bringing the problem for me to solve. And in one particular meeting, I said, well, what are you thinking you should do? And he told me what it was. And I said, well, I think you should do that. And I also think that the next time the problem comes up, you should just do that. Do whatever you think, and I'll support you on it. And you could see he was nervous about it. And he said, are you saying I need to get my big boy pants on? I said, well, I don't know that I would have worded it that way, but yes. And I said, what makes you nervous about that? And it was, I'm afraid of doing something wrong, and I'm afraid of, getting in trouble or getting yelled at. And I said, well, how about this? You have a get out of jail free card. The next time you have an opportunity, you make the decision. And if it is wrong, I will swear that I pre-approved it. So like, you can't even get in trouble for it. How's that? And it never came to that because he was already making good decisions. He didn't have the confidence in himself to do that. And I had to give him somehow, like, he needed that confidence to do it.
That's excellent. I mean, that's what you need to do. You need to make your team understand that, it's like I say in personal relationships, like with my wife. If she does something in public that I disagree with, I back her up. Then when we're in private, we have the discussion about, hey, maybe next time.
I don't like chocolate ice cream.
Yeah, maybe next time don't do that. So that's excellent. I mean, you gave him the ability to have the confidence to make that decision because you told him ahead of time that you were going to back him up, and that's huge.
Well, and I can tell you that all of those people that Nick so I worked in the company where Nick, at least one of them, the one, if I'm correct, where Nick had other people run his support calls, etc. And the folks that did that are now VPs of a much larger company because he really positioned them to be an authority and to be a leader in the company.
Yeah. And they see, like, when you're growing fast in a company, you can't fix everything. You have to choose what to rescue and what not to rescue.
Yeah.
So here's a question for you. What did you stop rescuing, even though you knew that you could do it faster?
That is a great question. I mean, when you first asked the question, I started thinking, okay, that's not just at a company, that's in life, right? There
Your
are
kids.
things that we have to, that we have to stop rescuing. Um, the problem that it was a problem that we probably still have, right? But throwing it from, I've talked a lot about my engineering organization leadership, but on the support side, you know, um, we our core value was raving fans, and that has always driven everything that we have done, and letting things slide in the short term, to meet SLAs and to potentially risk the raving fans um, value that I live by and the company lived by, right? That was hard. And when I say slip, I mean we're not overachieving. We're not giving 30-second response times, right? It could wait a little longer to get somebody to learn something new, so somebody else can support the things. And that was hard for me because I'm so wired to please, and to live up to that value of raving fans. So I would say that I let slip on a couple of occasions in two different organizations that I worked on, the white glove service, right? It didn't fall into unacceptable range, but it definitely slipped, and that was pretty easy for me to kind of give up in that regard, um, once I saw the benefits of it. Right, once I saw that more and more people are now getting up to speed and understanding the whys of the customer, understanding how to solve problems, and and it allowed us eventually to get back to where I wanted to be. But there was definitely something that we had to let slip, especially in that most recent company that Marnie and I started. But what about you, Marnie?
Well, I mean, that was the one that came to mind for me. Um, the other, so I can think in the customer success world, same thing. I'm a pleaser person as well, like the immediate response to emails type of thing. And when onboarding new customer success managers, that the client would CC me and their new customer success manager, and I would have to have the patience of, I told the new person, you reply to me with what you think the answer is, right? If you weren't confident yourself in the answer. And I could have answered it again, like Nick, straight away, but I'm going to wait. It's the only way to kind of train them to be able to have the confidence to do it on their own. So response time. Yeah.
I want to throw one other thing out there, Mike, because I have a feeling you might disagree with this one. But one of our lead engineers at one of the organizations I was working with was 100% anti-technical debt, right? Everything that we did, he's like, we need to put it through the review process to ensure that we're not doing throwaway work, that we're not doing this, doing that. At some point, we made a conscious decision to live with the technical debt and actually accept it and say, this ain't the worst thing in the world. Why? Because it builds speed, right? But number two, it allowed more of our junior people and new people that we brought on board, right, to get up to speed by fixing that technical debt. It's a great way to learn the environment that you're working in. I say that because sometimes that has, even at that company that I was working for, that got a lot of pushback, but I was definitely willing to sacrifice that because there were greater goods in terms of producing with more speed. Yes, we'll have to come back, but I had a pipeline to bring people in to learn the product to kind of fix those issues.
I actually agree with that. I think that's an important tool for training the junior people as well. So yeah, surprisingly, I guess I agree with that. But so let's translate this for the CTO that's listening. If they want less dependency without losing those standards, what are the operating moves that you'd recommend they install immediately?
You go.
Oh, well, I mean, I would, I'm 100% believer, and it's evidenced by the books that we wrote, that their focus is all around helping their team develop themselves individually, and developing the things that we've talked about in terms of how we communicate, what our expectations are, how they learn, what all the soft skills, right? That's where my investment would be, because once you do that, especially today, we stole Adam Grant's phrase that we're in the midst of a character revolution, even though we have technology and automation and AI thrown at us from every different angle, right? So today, those skills, they're not nearly as important as they used to be. The technical skills, learning how to code, sure, they are important, 100%, right? You need the architects, you even need, I will argue, junior developers, because they need to grow into architects at some point. But skills can be learned really with the drop of a hat these days, right? As long as somebody spends the time on whatever platform of choice to learn skills, technical skills, they can learn those. What people don't have an easy way to grasp is the soft skills, the character skills. And that's where I would focus on as any leader, whether I'm a CTO, a CEO, CMO, doesn't matter, CRO, because a functioning team who all know how to lead themselves only amplifies and excels the growth and the output that you can bring forward with that team once people are leading themselves, and you're not having to lead them and handhold them through the process.
Oh, I quite like that. It made me think how last night I was talking with someone and saying, if you want that next job, you need to be prepared for it. So let's start thinking about what character skills you would demonstrate to be in that next job. And there's no reason you can't be doing that right now.
We talk a lot about, especially with our app Blue that's coming out, we talk a lot about the fact that finish doesn't equal readiness. And people feel like they're finished because they have certifications and they have diplomas and degrees. But that doesn't mean that you're ready. You're ready when you can take ownership on things, when you can be resilient with things, when you are a good team player. That's when you're ready. Sure, you need the baseline skills, the certifications, those hard skills. But again, they're so easy to get these days that doesn't mean just because you have those that you're ready to be successful. You're ready to be successful when you have those other competencies that are much harder to measure.
So let's give the listener some kind of escalation filter. Before a problem reaches the CTO, what needs to be true?
Oh, if it's going to go all the way to CTO, I know the rules that we had. There better be a blocker, right? People can't do their work. It should have gone through all kinds of testing. That sounds fairly technical. So Nick, I'll let you take that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had defined escalation paths, right? And when it reaches that level, you better have a top tier customer at risk. You better have an outage, right? You better come to the table with that escalation of exactly what the problem is, what is currently being worked on, who owns it. But I think the better way to answer that question is you can't go to you don't need to be going to senior leadership because a feature's not working the way it's supposed to work, or even one client or two clients are just dissatisfied. There has to be guide rails in terms of, okay, it's a security incident, right? This is a serious security incident because we expose data. There is an impact to the company reputation. Let's take it to into a leader, right? So I think the important point here is you have to do that reflection as an organization to understand what those thresholds are that you say, okay, this is a must-have escalation. And then in addition to that, you have to define what work needs to happen when that particular issue is being escalated. If you're not doing that, then you're just willy-nilly and you'll never get a grasp on your business if you don't define those things.
So the fastest way to reduce dependency is to change what you do when someone brings you a problem, right? So what's the exact question that you'd ask that forces ownership back to that person?
Well, I think Marty kind of answered that to some extent earlier, right? How would what is your solution to solve this problem?
Yeah,
I think that is table stakes, right? Because at that point you are getting buy-in from the person that is bringing you the problem, right? You're building confidence in them. You're valuing their opinion, but most importantly, you're getting some sort of barometer around whether that person can actually solve the problem. Now, there could be 8 million variants to that, right? The person may bring you the problem and they have no business solving the problem, right? So then there's you're making sure that the escalation path was followed the correct way. But to me, it's okay. If somebody's bringing a problem that they conceptually could solve, it's talk to me about how you're solving this problem.
Yeah.
So what's the second question that you ask if after all that they still try to hand it to you?
Well, I wouldn't accept it, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
just don't take it.
I think it's all about, I'm asking myself, is this the right person to solve this problem? If this is the right person, or it's supposed to be the right person, right? Then I start asking questions about their understanding and trying to start to, number one, build up their competency and their experience to ultimately solve this problem, or number two, saying, okay, that this person is not in the right seat on the bus. So I mean, there's a whole bunch of nuances to that. You don't go from A to Z in 5 seconds, right? If you're trying to reduce yourself as the bottleneck, obviously there could be a whiteboard session. There's a bunch that could go on there. But I think the important point that you've been bringing up, Mike, and Marty and I have kind of alluded to it, right, is you can't just give the answer. I mean, that is the most important point. You have to share your knowledge and test the knowledge of the person that's bringing you the problem.
I don't know if these are the 3 things you're supposed to test, if these are the right words, but is it a knowledge problem, a will problem, or a capability problem? And then, if it's a will or a capability problem, that's way different. If it's a knowledge problem, that one's easy, right? What resource can they? But I think that's what you need to think about on why you're getting pushed back as you try to push back.
Yeah. So what happens if they make the wrong call? How do you correct that without taking control back?
I think it's, again, what Nick said, where you ask the right questions. So explain the thought processes. This is very much where it's exactly like teaching, right? So I don't ever want somebody to it would make me crazy if somebody said, Ms. Stockman, I can't do this problem. And I would say, well, where did you start? And they said, well, I just can't do it. That doesn't give me their thinking whatsoever. That's actually a really hard problem to fix. But if they can start to explain their thinking, and then you can ask questions to help them think differently around wherever it is they went sideways.
I was going to say you just fire them, but I mean, I think we all have to remember that we've been in those shoes before, and we've given the wrong answer. I mean, I have dozens, if not hundreds of times, and we're fooling ourselves if we're not we're not being honest about that. And you know what? We ended up becoming the owner of all this institutional knowledge. So this person can do that as well. So you have to give grace. It depends on how they answer the wrong problem and what the impact was. But you don't just give up on the person. You ask them questions. You figure out exactly where it went wrong, and then the biggest thing is, there's a saying, right, that there's no such thing as failure. There's just feedback. You have to treat it as feedback, and you have to correct course.
So what's really interesting about all this is that none of these rules that we're talking about are about control at all. They work because they're replacing you as the operating system. Yeah. So if a CTO could install only one rule this week, which one actually matters the most?
I'm going to say ask better questions. Nick, what are you going to say? I've never been a CTO. So,
yeah, I think CTOs, or any leader, senior leader for that matter, probably have a bunch of great roles that I would love to learn from. But, I like the asking better questions. I think that's absolutely one rule. I would say if I'm a CTO, if there's one rule that I'm going to implement this week, and I'm going to do it every week or every 2 weeks from now and for the entirety of 2026, it is, okay, what is something that I and I alone can do? And how am I going to get somebody else to do it?
Excellent.
That's a good one.
That's a great one. Yeah. So guys, we've talked about mechanics, and I want to close on identity, because the team, they're going to keep trying to pull you back into the old role if you haven't decided who you are in that moment. So if the leader could make one identity decision that protects them from becoming the bottleneck again, what should they decide about themselves before the next escalation hits?
Man, you ask tough questions.
No kidding.
Go ahead, Barney.
Well, I think it's a bit of what Nick said in thinking about what you want to be next and how to work your way out of it and create a scaffold for the folks that come behind. I don't know that I have a better answer than that, but we always talk about legacy and thinking about sort of an exit plan. But if you follow Nick's rule of how to, work your way out of something, I think if you identify with where you want to be next, that helps you scaffold for the folks coming behind you.
Yeah, I think the identity you need to take on as a leader is, people often talk about the difference between traditional and command and control leadership, where the focus is, I am directing, right? I am pushing down. You compare that and contrast it with servant leadership, which is, I am all about lifting up others. I'm building. I'm not going down like this pyramid. I'm building up my team, and I think that's where, and I'm biased because this is where I found success in my career. Right, that is where recognizing that identity in myself is in that it's all about building others up and not about pushing down mandates and direction, which is awfully hard to do because it's a lot slower in terms of seeing results. But that is where I would focus on with an identity set or reset tomorrow, if I could.
Yeah, well, this has been a great conversation, guys, as usual. Really appreciate you being here. Why don't you let the listeners know, what they can do to connect with you?
Oh, LinkedIn's easy. We have fairly unique names, so Marnie Stockman and Nick Coniglio. Also, you can find us at leaditlikelasso.com or thebusinessofyou.ai.
I was trying to find the Business of You website, and it was a really strange coaching site. So, yeah, I'm glad.
Businessofyou.ai. That is
for the .ai extension in there.
Yep. Well, thanks so much, Marnie and Nick, for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Honor.
So,
Thanks.
the core lesson here is simple. Dependency isn't a team flaw. It's a leadership system that you can redesign. If you're a senior technical leader and everything still seems to come back to you, decisions, etc., take the firefighter CTO quiz. It'll show you exactly where dependency is forming in your team and how to fix it. You can find it right here on the screen. Whoops, wrong one. I'm an idiot. There it is. Head on over to that link. Take the quiz. It's going to tell you what type of leader you are, and it will help you get past some of these issues that we've been discussing. But thanks again for watching the live version of Technology Leadership Edge, and we'll see you again next Friday. And we're done.